Hello, welcome back to Blender Social Life Learning. In this episode, finally, we're gonna use a node to do a selections of mesh data, and that node is actually called select mesh elements by locations. And this node is actually pretty big, and you probably want to read the documentations before you do anything with it. Some of them are pretty intuitive. You can just give it a try, and then like this one by center and radius, that's pretty understandable. You're selecting components of mesh based on the center and radius, while the rest of them might be slightly not so clear. But you can always select the nodes and then get the help, online help or offline help. The offline helps looks something like this: mesh select, and then you can read all the documentations, and there's also this online selections, online documentations, and you can have a look. This one usually have some images. I think it would be nice to have like a node setup, but I'll try to make a couple of example. Let's start actually selecting by center and radius. I think that's the easiest one. I'll delete everything and file, save as, select by radius. I'll probably make a couple of videos for this selection node, otherwise it might take too long. So let's start with for example, like a grid. Actually use plain MK2 and have a viewer draw. And right away, of course, when we are doing selections, we need to make sure what we are actually want to select and to mask. Selecting vertices is probably the easiest, but once you have like vertices and faces and edges, you kind of need to work on it slightly differently. Depends on what you're doing. We can start with a vertices masking first. So, okay, plane by default, plane looks like this. Let's create our plane first. Let's make it 8 by 8 and center it. Actually 10 by 10 should be nice. And we definitely need to plug this data into this guy. First of all, just all of them, all the data. And then for the output, if you want to mask the vertices, for example, just the vertices, it's actually pretty easy. In order to do that, you need a list mask node, and this should be doing the masking. So that's the mask goes in there, and then the original vertices data goes in there, and the output should be the selected or non-selected components. So let's try with selected. Right away, you might actually notice that it doesn't work because you need to change the level list into true. So that's a common thing to do. And right away, you can see the selection is already happening. So by default, the center of radius is actually at 0, 0, 0, and we can move it like so. So that's pretty clear, I guess. And if you want to do the masking of the polygon face, for example, you do it slightly differently. You might think that you need to do this face masking and polygon data pipe in there, and then the output goes in there. But then again, you're not getting the result that you might expect. For polygon masking, you don't actually need to mask the vertices. You can actually use the original vertices. So this is like a more correct way to do it, I think. So there we go. That's procedural list masking and procedural selection of mesh elements by locations or by all of these parameters. Currently we are using by center and radius. Sometimes when you're selecting, you want to use, maybe just use like an empty, for example. We can do that. Let's say we have this empty objects, and then we can use the object ID, get our object empty, and then the matrices, you can use the matrices here and just get the locations of that empty. So if you check the empty, if I run the playback and then move the empty around, this thing will update. So we can pipe that location of the empty into the center of these selections. And now you see that we are selecting using the position of the empty. So that's, I think, kind of more useful. So if you want to select the edges, you can also do that. But before I do that, there's also these options. Include partial selection. So that's actually, if you can guess, or I'll try to explain. I think that's if you are only selecting like partially, for example, this is with the thing off. So you're like, for example, this is the radius. This is the radius that we currently have. With the partial selection on, we actually selecting, even if it's just being selected a little bit, it will get selected. So that's why it's a little bit bigger. So you might want to use that option. Okay, radius is easy enough. If you actually have the, let's say you have the monkey head, and we put it in. So instead of using plane, we use the real objects like the monkey. So objects in. There's actually two ways we can bring in the monkey, whether using objects in MK3, or we can also use the object ID out MK2. Both of them will work. Normally it's recommended to use this one, objects in MK3, but this one will work as well. So grab the monkey, and if we plug this guy, like the vertices, edges, and polygon informations, and we pipe in the polygon data there, and then the vertices data in there, we should be able to select the monkey head. Let me try doing this properly. Okay, I think this is sort of working. So if I reset the monkey head to, I'll scale it down and just reset its position. And for the original monkey head, I will turn it into a wireframe. You see the blue part is the one that's get masked. If I turn on the playback and then move the empty around, you can see the selection is actually working. There's actually we can actually kind of use the radius of this empty, the scaling for the radius. So if we vector out the scale in here, now we can scale. If we scale the empty, you can see it's also affecting the selections. So this might be useful depending on what you're doing. So there you go. I think that's clear enough with this select mesh element by locations. And currently we are in this mode by center and radius of the empty. This guy. So yeah, so that's I think that's pretty much it for this live coding. We're gonna continue with the rest of the modes, the options that we have. But yeah, hopefully this is pretty clear enough. And of course, once you get this guy selected, you can do anything with it. So you can output like based on the selections, maybe just this bit. If you bake it, of course, you get just that part. You can perhaps do like solidify, maybe give it some thickness, so it becomes like a mask. It's mask for Suzanne. And if we reset the position, and yeah, so that's a Suzanne mask, just that partially selected. Sorry, I'll go to the outliner and get the original Suzanne, and then bring it back. There you go. That's so that's pretty much it for this live noding video, and I'll continue with the next option in the next video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Thank you.